You have been in a test so specific, so personal, so precisely calibrated to the exact places in you that needed to be proven, that it could only have been designed by someone who knew you completely. And the hardest part of this test was not the difficulty of what you faced, it was that you faced it without a single person knowing the full weight of what was happening inside you. You endured it in silence, you held it together in public, while carrying something in private that most people would not have survived. And what God wants you to know today, in this specific moment, is that the test is over. You did not just survive it, you passed it. And the victory you won in silence is about to be announced in a way that the whole world can see. Stay right here. This message was sent to you for this moment. I am speaking directly to you right now, the chosen one who has been in a season that nobody around you fully understood, a season where the external appearance of your life may have been relatively normal, where you showed up to your responsibilities and maintained your relationships and kept your obligations, while internally you were navigating something that was testing you at a level that had no precedent in your own experience. You did not tell most people what was really happening. You could not because they would not have cared, but because what you were going through existed in a dimension that was too interior, too spiritual, too specifically yours to be fully translated into the language of ordinary conversation. And so you carried it, quietly, faithfully, alone in a way that was not the aloneness of isolation, but the aloneness of a test that by its nature had to be passed by the one being tested without anyone else being able to carry it for them. That is the hardest kind of test there is. Not the kind where the difficulty is obvious and the people around you can see what you are going through and rally around you with support and acknowledgement, but the kind where the battle is entirely interior, where the victory or defeat happens in the private places of your spirit, where no human witness has access, where the only one who sees the full picture of what you are enduring and how you are responding to it is God, and where the faithfulness or the failure is measured not by external behavior, but by the invisible, interior choices of the soul that no one but heaven can observe. Type Amen. If you have been carrying something in this season that no one around you fully knew the weight of, let me tell you what the test was actually testing. Because the surface content of what you went through, the specific circumstances, the specific people, the specific challenges, those were the form of the test, but not the substance of it. The substance of every test that God allows in the life of a chosen one is always deeper than its surface form. And what this specific test was measuring was not whether you could handle the circumstances. It was measuring what happens to your character, your faith, your love, your relationship with God, when the circumstances are as difficult as they have been, and when no one is watching, and when the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do, and when doing the right thing produces no visible reward and no external recognition. It was measuring whether you would hold your integrity when holding it cost you something real, whether you would choose forgiveness when bitterness was more available and felt more justified, whether you would stay faithful in the relationship with God when that relationship was the only thing in your life that was not producing visible, tangible, immediate returns, whether you would continue to treat people with dignity and grace when you were not receiving the same in return, whether you would keep believing in what God promised when everything visible was contradicting the promise, whether you would maintain your peace when peace was the most countercultural and irrational response available to you. These were the things the test was actually measuring. And in every one of these areas you passed. Type I held on, if you received the truth that in the deepest and most invisible dimensions of the test, you chose the right thing, even when the right thing was the hardest thing. I want to take some time to honor the specific ways you won in silence, because the victory that is coming to you deserves to be celebrated. And the celebration is most meaningful when it is connected to what specifically was won. So let me name what you won, because God sees each of these things clearly, and He wants you to understand the full scope of the victory that heaven has been watching. You won the battle against bitterness. There were moments when bitterness was the rational response, when what was done to you or what was taken from you or what was left unacknowledged or unreturned was sufficient justification for a hardness of heart that most people around you would have fully understood and even validated, and you chose not to go there, not easily, not without the temptation, not without the moments where the bitterness pressed hard and you had to make a conscious choice to set it down again. But you set it down, again and again, in silence, without applause, without anyone knowing the discipline it required. And the heart that came through that battle without the permanent wound of bitterness is one of the greatest victories of your entire life. Type "I chose not to be bitter" if you receive the acknowledgement of this specific victory that you won in the silence of your own interior battle. You won the battle against self-pity. There were seasons in the test when self-pity was not just understandable but almost irresistible. When the weight of what you were carrying combined with the absence of recognition for what you were carrying and the loneliness of carrying it without a witness, created an environment where collapsing into the narrative of poor me would have felt like the only available relief. And you did not stay there. You may have visited it. You are human, and the pressure was real, but you did not build a home in it. You did not let it become the primary lens through which you read your own story. You kept getting up. You kept choosing the narrative of purpose over the narrative of victimhood. You kept your eyes on the God who designed the test rather than on the test itself. And that choice, made repeatedly in the privacy of your own soul, is a victory that has consequences that are going to reach far beyond your personal life. Type "I got up" if you receive the acknowledgement of every time you chose to rise from the pull of self-pity in the silence of this test. You won the battle of trust. Perhaps the most significant battle of all, because the test was specifically designed to press against your trust in God at the point where it was thinnest, at the point where the evidence of your circumstances gave the most credible argument for doubting His goodness or His awareness or His care or His timing, and you chose trust. Not the easy trust of someone whose circumstances are cooperating, not the trust that has never been tested at the level that questions whether the one being trusted is actually trustworthy. The trust that looks at circumstances that seem to contradict everything God promised and says, "I do not understand this, but I trust the one who does." That is the rarest and most precious form of faith that exists. And you exercised it through the hardest season of your life, and God saw every single moment of it. Take a moment and like this video, because someone who is still in the middle of their test needs to know that what they are doing in silence is being seen by heaven. Type "I trusted when it was hard" if you receive the acknowledgement of the specific victory of trust that you won in the silence of the season you have been walking through. Now let me tell you what the test being over actually means for your life in practical terms, because there is a pattern that God follows when a chosen one passes a significant test, a pattern that is consistent throughout Scripture and throughout the experience of His people across generations. When the test is complete, when the season of proving is finished and the results are in, God does not simply move quietly to the next thing without marking what just occurred. He marks it. He acknowledges it. He responds to the faithfulness that was demonstrated in a way that is proportional to the faithfulness shown. For Job, the end of the test produced twice what was taken. For Joseph, the end of the years of trial produced elevation to a position of authority that directly corresponded to the character that the trial had formed. For David, the end of the years of being hunted and misunderstood and undervalued produced a kingship that was far more significant than anything he could have achieved through a less difficult path. The pattern is consistent. The end of a significant test in the life of a chosen one is followed by a significant response from God that is specifically tailored to what was given and what was proven during the test. What is coming for you is specifically tailored to you, to the specific things you gave during the test, to the specific character that was proven, to the specific ways your faithfulness was expressed when faithfulness was the hardest available choice. And the response that is coming is not going to be small because the test was not small. The measure of the response is proportional to the measure of the proving, and what you proved in this season was significant. Type "proportional return" if you receive the truth that God's response to what you proved in this test is going to be proportional to the size and the faithfulness of what you gave in it. I want to speak to the silence specifically, because the fact that you won this in silence, that the victory was private and unwitnessed and unacknowledged by the people around you, is not a diminishment of the victory. It is an amplification of it. In God's economy, the victories that are won in secret, that are not performed for an audience or accomplished in order to be seen, that exist only in the relationship between the soul and its God. Those victories carry the greatest weight, because they cannot be attributed to ego or to the desire for recognition. They are pure, and what is pure in the economy of heaven is what is most powerfully rewarded. The silence of your victory is not going to remain the context in which the victory is celebrated. What was won in secret is going to be announced publicly. What was proven in the private places of your spirit is going to be expressed in the visible circumstances of your life. What you gave God in the quiet is going to be returned to you in the loud. The silence was the season of the winning. What is coming is the season of the showing. Stay with me in part 2, because God is going to tell you exactly what comes after the test. What the reward looks like for a chosen one who won in silence. What your life is about to look like now that the hardest season is behind you. And how to receive what is coming with the posture that allows God to give you the full measure of what He has prepared. Welcome back, chosen one. If you made it to part 2, the acknowledgement of what God spoke in part 1 has done something in you. The recognition that you have been in a test, that the test was real and significant and specifically calibrated to the deepest places in you, that you won in the invisible places where only God was watching, and that what was won in secret is about to be announced in a way that the world can see, that truth is working in you right now, producing something between relief and anticipation that is entirely appropriate. In part 2, God is going to tell you what comes after the test, what the life on the other side of it looks like, how to receive what is coming, and what He specifically wants to say to you about who you are now that the hardest season is behind you. Type I passed if you are receiving fully the truth that you are on the other side of the test now, and what is coming is the response to having passed it. Let me start with what comes after the test. The first thing that comes is rest. And I want to be specific about this, because rest after a significant season of testing is not laziness or passivity or the absence of forward movement. It is a specific gift that God gives to the spirit that has been in sustained engagement with something hard, the kind of rest that repairs what the battle wore down, that replenishes what the sustained pressure consumed, that allows the nervous system and the soul to release the vigilance that survival required and settle into a quality of ease that is the reward of someone who is no longer in the fight but in the recovery from it. You are allowed to rest. God is not immediately pressing you into the next thing without giving you the space to fully exhale from what just concluded. He is not a taskmaster who moves His chosen ones from test to test without the interlude of restoration. He is a Father who knows that the body and the soul have limits, and that honoring those limits is not weakness but wisdom. Rest in this season, not permanently, not in a way that becomes avoidance of the next thing, but fully, gratefully, with the settled peace of someone who has been through something significant and has earned the right to breathe before what comes next begins. Type I rest. Now, if you are choosing to receive the rest that God is offering on the other side of the test, rather than immediately filling the space with the next thing, the second thing that comes after the test is clarity. The confusion that characterized parts of the test season, the sense of not fully understanding what was happening, or why, or where it was leading, that confusion was a feature of the test rather than a feature of your life going forward. Tests are by nature disorienting. They are designed to press you in ways that your current understanding cannot fully process. They require you to trust what you cannot fully see. And the disorientation of not being able to see fully is part of what is being tested. Not the disorientation itself, but your response to it. Whether you can hold your peace and your faith and your integrity in the middle of not understanding. On the other side of the test, clarity arrives, not all at once, but steadily, in increasing measure, as the season that required the disorientation gives way to the season that is built on what the disorientation produced. You are going to begin to see your own story differently. The chapters that seemed random or punitive or without purpose are going to reveal themselves as the precisely intentional formation that they were. The connections between what you went through and what you are now equipped to do are going to become visible in ways they were not during the test. And the path ahead, which was unclear during the test because the completion of the test was required before the next direction could be given, is going to become increasingly legible as you step into this new season. Type clarity coming. If you receive the truth that the confusion of the test season is giving way to a clarity that will make your path more visible than it has been. The third thing that comes after the test is the reward, and the reward for a chosen one who won in silence is not a generic blessing, but a specific response to specific faithfulness. Let me tell you the dimensions of the reward that God is releasing in your life now that the test is complete. The first dimension is restoration. What the test took from you in the natural, whether in terms of time, energy, resources, opportunities, relationships, or the simple quality of peace that sustained pressure consumes, God is going to restore. Not in an approximate or general way. Specifically, the restoration is going to feel personal because it is personal. God watched what the test cost you in detail. He knows what was spent. He knows what was lost. He knows what was deferred. And the restoration he is releasing is calibrated to the exact cost of what you went through. It is not a general improvement in circumstances. It is a specific, targeted, heaven-designed restoration that addresses the exact things the test took. Type restore everything if you receive by faith the specific restoration that God is releasing for everything the test cost you. The second dimension of the reward is elevation. Every significant test in the life of a chosen one is followed by a corresponding elevation of position and impact, because the test was not just about proving what you had. It was building what you needed for the next level. The qualities that were formed and proven through the test are the exact qualities that qualify you for what comes next. And what comes next is at a higher level than where you were when the test began. Not a slightly higher level, significantly higher. Because the test was significant, and the formation it produced is significant, and the assignment that the formation is preparation for is significant. The elevation is going to show up in multiple areas. In the level of opportunity that arrives, in the level of influence that becomes available, in the level of impact that your presence and your voice and your work produces, in the level of provision that flows into your life to resource the assignment, all of it going up. Not eventually. In this season, as the direct and proportional response of God to what you proved in the one that just ended. Type higher if you receive the truth that the test you just passed was preparation for an elevation that corresponds to the level of the test. The third dimension of the reward is vindication. The people who watched you go through the test and drew conclusions based on incomplete information, the ones who saw the difficulty of your season and interpreted it as evidence of something wrong with you rather than something right, the ones who spoke words over your situation that were not kind or not true, the ones who used your vulnerability during the test to position themselves above you in the narrative of your story. God is going to respond to all of it, not through your retaliation, not through confrontation or argument or the pursuit of justice through human channels, through elevation, through the simple, undeniable, impossible to misinterpret fact of your life after the test, looking so different from your life during it that no honest observer can draw the same conclusions they drew before. Your life is going to be your vindication. The story of what God does after your hardest test is going to answer every voice that spoke against you during it more powerfully than any response you could have crafted in your own words. Let him be your defense. Let the fruit of this new season be your testimony, and let the silence in which you won become the foundation of the announcement that is already being prepared. Type vindicated by the fruit if you are choosing to let God be your vindicator and to let the fruit of your new season answer everything that was spoken against you in the old one. I want to speak to something that can happen after the test that is worth being aware of so that it does not become a subtle trap. After a season of sustained difficulty, after a long period where vigilance and endurance were the primary spiritual postures required, the arrival of ease can feel disorienting in a way that actually generates a new kind of anxiety. You have been in survival mode long enough that the absence of the thing you were surviving can produce a false alarm, a sense that something must be wrong because things feel less hard than they did, a waiting for the other shoe to drop that prevents you from fully entering the rest and the reward that you have earned. This is not a spiritual crisis. It is a nervous system response to the transition from a season of sustained pressure to a season of relative peace. And the way through it is not to search for the next problem, or to manufacture difficulty to feel productive, or to refuse the ease because it feels unfamiliar and therefore untrustworthy. The way through it is to consciously and deliberately receive the peace, to choose it, to say to your own soul, this is the season after the test, and I am allowed to experience it as what it is. Not as a trap, not as a temporary reprieve before the next round, but as a genuine gift from a faithful God who knows that what I went through required recovery and has designed this season to provide it. Type I receive the peace if you are choosing right now to receive the ease of the post-test season without looking for reasons to distrust it. Let me close with what God specifically wants to say to you about who you are now that the hardest test is behind you. Because who you are now is genuinely different from who you were when the test began. Not different in your essential identity. The person God made you to be was always who you were. But different in your capacity, in your depth, in your proven understanding of what you are actually made of, in your relationship with God, which was tested at the level that reveals what is real and came through that testing with something that is more solid and more certain than what existed before the test pressed against it. You know now that you can hold on when holding on feels impossible. You know now that your faith has a depth that does not dissolve under pressure. You know now that your love can survive betrayal, and your peace can survive chaos, and your trust in God can survive the seasons when God seems silent. You know these things not because someone told you, but because you lived through the test that proved them. And that kind of knowing changes everything about how you move into the rest of your life, because you are no longer moving into the future wondering if you have what it takes. You know that you have what it takes, because you just proved it, in the hardest test of your life, in silence, and you won. Type I know what I am made of if you receive the full truth of who you have become through the test that is now behind you. The silence is ending. What you won in the private place is coming into the public eye, not because you are seeking recognition, but because God is faithful. And when a chosen one passes the hardest test of their life, with their integrity intact, and their faith proven, and their love refined, God responds in a way that is visible, that is unmistakable, that is proportional to the faithfulness shown, that makes it impossible for anyone watching to miss the connection between who you are and what God is doing in your life. You passed the test. The hardest one. The one that nobody knew you were taking, and that you won without anyone watching. God saw all of it, every moment, of every choice in every silent battle. He saw it, He honored it, and the honor He is releasing into your life now that the test is complete is going to be something that tells the full story of a chosen one who went through the fire and came out more than they went in. Walk into what is coming, chosen one. The test is over. The victory is yours, and the reward is already on its way. Type the victory is mine if you receive everything God has spoken through this message, and you are stepping into the full reward of the test you passed in silence. Heaven saw every moment, every quiet choice, every silent battle won, every tear that fell where no one could see, every prayer that went up when praying felt like the only thing left. Every time you chose right when wrong was more available and less costly. Heaven saw all of it, and heaven is responding to all of it, right now, in this season. With everything God has prepared for the chosen one, who passed the hardest test of their life in silence and won.